Hi, I'm Andrew Connell with Critical Path Training, and in this session on designing lists and schemas, we're going to talk about some of the new and improved events we have in SharePoint 2010. So first, some of the new and improved events that we have things like adding new SP webs to a site. So there's pre and post events, just like we have in traditional SharePoint, what we're used to, but now we have events that are going to help us with when we create new SharePoint sites, and when that concludes, and that's going to be the provisioned event. We also have new events when we're adding lists and deleting lists as well. With these events, Microsoft has had to add some new registration capabilities with these to the feature schema. So what we now have is inside of the receivers node here, inside of a feature, when we're going to go through and register these events, we now have a new scoping mechanism, where that's going to allow us to define where we want these events to apply. Do we want them to apply at the site or the site collection level? So one of the other new things that we have in SharePoint 2010 are post-synchronous events. So in the past, we've had synchronous events or asynchronous events where once something has been added to a SharePoint site, we've then wanted some code to run to go do some post-analysis or post-processing on it, but we didn't want that to hold up the user from being redirected back to the page to show them that their item was actually added. Maybe we want to go through and actually run some code, though, before the control was actually handed back to the user in the browser. This was always never really possible in the previous version because everything was always asynchronous once the item had been committed to the database. So now what we have is this new post-synchronous events, to where I can go in and set a property on my event to say that even though it is a post event, I can now have it say I want it to be synchronous, so I can do some post-processing. So before the controls handed back to the user. So for instance, let's say you go to a conference and you've collected a bunch of conference attendees and their contact information, say in an info path form. When I go through and upload that info path form, before the users are given the control back to see the browser and to show that the form is in the browser, maybe I want to go through and open up that form, and I want to pull out all the contacts and then create items inside of a contact list. But I want that to happen before the user sees that the form's been added to a document library. So I could use this new technique to go through and do that. And the way you're going to do that is with the SP event receiver definition. It has a new property called the synchronization property, where I can set if I want it to be asynchronous, which is the default, or if I want it to be synchronous. Now, some of the other things that some of the new improvements that we've had inside the SharePoint lists, SharePoint events, is some of the new error reporting or error control that we have. In the past, we can always go through and we could cancel an event from happening, so we could use our own custom validation to say that when somebody's adding a new item to a SharePoint list, I could do some custom logic in the background and then say, no, I want to cancel this event, and hand them back an error message. But the error message that was given was always the one that was using the layout pages, the application pages, and it was just the stock standard look and feel of SharePoint that we really didn't have much control over. However, now in SharePoint 2010, one of the new things that we can do is we can say, I want to cancel it, but I want to cancel it and redirect you to a specific error page. And so I can create my own custom application pages and then set up a specific property on the error event, give it a URL, and say cancel this, so that when the error is actually canceled, it's going to redirect me to a page. We'll see this in a demo in just a few minutes. Now, one of the caveats with this is that it's only going to work in, say, a browser-based experience. So if I'm uploading a document or saving a document to a SharePoint library from Word, it's not going to redirect me to that URL page or to that URL, because the context is not the same as being in the browser as if I'm in an Office client. So just know this only works within the browser context here. Another new change that we have is that with event impersonation. So in the previous version of SharePoint, let's say that I had some event receiver sitting on a task list, and I fired off a workflow, and that workflow was going to write items to that task list. Well, SharePoint workflows run within the context of the system, and so the identity that was firing off that event on that task list was always going to be the system account. But maybe that's not what I wanted. Maybe I wanted to have a way to go through and find out what user was responsible for really adding these items to the list. And so what this event impersonation is going to do is that it's not going to do any kind of special impersonation for me. What it does is that it's going to hand down two properties: the token of the user that actually originally kicked off the process, and the username of the person that actually kicked the process off. So that when a user goes in and kicks off a workflow, I'll find out that I can have access to go get these two values, and I can do my own impersonation if I need to impersonate the user that did that stuff, or that fired the process off. It's still going to run under the context of system in the example I'm giving you, but if you need access to find out who started it, you can get that information now. It's a lot easier to grab that stuff. Working with events in SharePoint now is a lot easier with the new tools that we have inside Visual Studio 2010. Out of the box in Visual Studio 2010, we now have SharePoint development tools. And so now, as you can see here, that we have just easily go through and say, I want to create a brand new event receiver. I can just say I want to click a new event receiver, and then SharePoint, the development tools, are going to ask me what kind of an event do you want to create. So in this case here, I've selected the list events, and then it gives me a list of all those events that are available to me. Item adding, item added, but it gives it to me in a more English sense that's a little bit easier for people to consume and understand, well, what am I actually trying to do here? I'm trying to change a field. I'm trying to add an item to a page. So in this instance, I have here where a list is being added or a list was added. So there's my pre and post events right there. Now let's go through and let's jump in and take a look at a demo. What we're going to see is how to go through and use this new error reporting where I can redirect somebody to a custom error page. So in this demo, what we're going to show you is how to go through and leverage those the new custom error pages from an event. So when I go through and I want to cancel my event, I'm going to redirect them to a custom ASPX page that I'm going to create. So what I have here is a SharePoint project that I've created that has a custom SharePoint item here for creating a new event receiver. So I just did that by right-clicking on my project and saying I want to add a new item, and then it's going to pop open the list of all the different SharePoint items. So I'm in SharePoint 2010, and I picked event receiver and then gave it a name. So if we look at my event receiver code here, what you'll see is I'm overriding the item adding event. I'm then going to go through and do a check inside the title to just see if the title has anything that says throw error in it. And so that's the easy way we're going to go through and trap our error and see it actually kick off. And then the new part here is what's inside this if statement, where on the status, I'm going to set the status equal to cancel with the redirect URL and then pass in the URL that I want to redirect them to. Okay? If we then go back and see that inside my project, I also elected to go through and create a custom error page. So if I look at my custom error page, this is just going to have a simple line of text in here that's going to explain what the error actually is. So in this custom application page here, you can see that all it is just showing a little error message right here inside the placeholder main. Now, thankfully, all the SharePoint tools have handled all the wiring up of the list stuff and all the registration for me. When I went through and created the event receiver, I said I wanted to bind this to the announcements list. So when I go through and deploy this guy, he's going to go through and deploy him and bind him against the announcements list. So I'll go through and just say I want to deploy this, and then watch Visual Studio go through, build everything up, package it up, and then deploy it to my site. And then I can go in and activate the feature that it's creating for this and see the change and see the changes to my announcements list and test it out. So if we go back to our site here and just refresh the site as the deployment went through and did a little bit of a recycling of the app. So with the page loaded, let's go into Site Actions and then pick Site Settings as we need to go in and activate the feature. This is going to be a site feature that I'm going to find my custom error page feature right here that's already been deployed. So I'm going to come back to my site, go find my announcements list. Here's an announcements list. And I'm going to go through and create a new announcement. So the first one we'll create is not going to throw the error. So I'll just say this is a test, and it should not throw the error. But the next one, where I type in throw error, we'll see now that it actually caught the error and it redirected them using the little dialog framework here. It just showed my custom error page inside the dialog. So I can have a custom UI here. This is really slick and much better experience for your users.